Hello and welcome, I hope you're all well. Today in this tutorial I'm going to easy and simply show you how to have your player character in a 2D game first look at the cursor and then I'm going to have him shoot bullets out at it. It's quite simple and we only need a couple lines of code, so don't worry, it's perfect for beginners. To start off, I've already imported a few textures which I use purely just for the background, and I also imported the texture which will be used for the bullet later on. I've also set up a player character which can move around the scene, and if you want to see how that's done, I'll link a video down to my tutorial down below. Alright, if we click on play now, you can see that at the moment the player is going to move around the scene, but he doesn't look at the cursor. Now this is the first thing we want to change, so we're going to want to make it so the player can look at the cursor, so we're going to go back to our movement script and we're just going to open that one up again. Now, the reason we're going to put this in the movement script instead of making our own script is because it's more my personal preference. So you can create your own script here if you want, but I prefer, if it's involving the player's movement, I want all the bits of it together. Currently everything here allows it to move and will continue to do so. We don't need to create any new variables for this. What we are going to do is write quite a few lines of code now, and they may look confusing, but they're actually not that bad. So we're going to start off by putting vector3 direction equals input.mousePosition minus camera.main.world to screen point, and then in two brackets transform.position, try and spell it right, and then semicolon. To quickly go through it, the vector3 direction creates a new vector3 variable and calls it direction. Then the input.mousePosition gets the position of where the mouse is, and then the camera.main.world to screen point, and then in brackets transform.position simply tells the computer relative in the screen where the mouse is. It then minuses one from the other to determine which direction the mouse is in. On the next line, we're going to write float angle equals math.f.atan2, then in brackets direction.y, direction.x times math.f.rad2 deg semicolon. Now that all sounded like a lot, but once again, split it down, making it easier. Float angle creates a float variable called angle. And then these next two bits, it's just a lot of math that takes our vector3 variable and turns it into a number the computer can use to perform the next line. So for this final line, which will seal all the nonsense together, we're going to write transform.rotation because we just want to make the player rotate, equals something new called a quaternion dot angle axis, and then in the brackets you're going to put a variable angle, comma, and then vector3 dot forward. Splitting this line up, the transform.rotation simply tells the computer we're going to be rotating the game object which this is attached to, in this case the player. The quaternion.angle axis is a function which tells it we're going to be returning a certain amount from a set point. And then in the brackets, the angle is, well, the direction we calculated earlier in float angle, and that vector3 forward is the point we want it to rotate that amount from. Before we head back, I'm just going to correct a little mistake. It should be, on this line, math.atan2 is direction.y, comma, direction.x. If it was the way we originally did it, x then y, then it would have been rotating back to front and your sprite would have been the wrong way around the entire time. So we're going to click on save and head to the scene to test it out. Back in the scene, we're just going to click on play to test it out, and don't worry, that's the big part of coding done for the rest of this. The rest of it's simple. So as we can see, we can now look around with our player and we can move around and he will always look at the character, which is what we want. Now what we want next is for him to shoot, so we're going to reopen the movement script and I'm going to add the shoot stuff here. It's not much code, so if you want to make a separate script for it you can do, but as I said, I'm just going to keep it on the movement for now. To start off, we're going to create two new variables to use. The first of which is going to be public game object bullet. Now this will contain the bullet itself, and since the game object we will use it to spawn in the actual bullet. And then the second will be public, not game object, public transform spawn point. So it's going to make a reference to a transform component of which we're going to use that transform values to actually spawn the bullet in the right place. Next, we're actually going to write something outside of the void update and we're going to create a new function for shooting. So what we're going to do is we're going to write public void shoot and then the two little brackets and then obviously the squiggly brackets to create that function. This basically creates a function which whenever we write the words shoot and then the brackets, it will run whatever's inside of it. And inside of this, we're only going to write one line, and it's going to be instantiate, then in brackets, bullet, comma, spawn point dot position, comma, spawn point dot rotation, and then semicolon to close it off. That line simply just spawns into the bullet, a game object, at the spawn point's position and rotation. It's really simple. To finish off, inside of the void update, we're going to write if, then in brackets, input dot get key down, in brackets, keycode dot space, and then inside of a squiggly brackets this comes up, we're going to just write the function shoot, brackets, then the semicolon. What this means is every time we press space, it's going to run the shoot function, which is going to spawn in a bullet. And that's that. If you want to change it from space to something else, go right on ahead. You just change, well, the word space. Click on save, and we're going to head back to the game. Back in Unity, you can see on our script it's now got all the new code in it. So what we're going to do, we're going to click on our player object in the script. You'll see in the movements components of it, you'll see that there's now the new empty places for us to drag stuff in. So for bullet, we need a game object, spawn point, we need a transform. We're just going to drag the player into the transform for now, as that's where we want the bullets to spawn. You'll notice, however, if you drag the enemy bullet texture into the bullets bit on the movement script, it doesn't fit. That's because the texture is not a game object. So what we need to do is turn it into it. So to simply do that, drag the texture into the screen and it will appear. And then on the right hand side, you notice it in the hierarchy. To click on that and drag it into the asset. This creates a prefab of the object, and what prefab is basically a copy of the same object which we can use wherever we want and place as many times as we want. Perfect for a bullet. We can also now drag the prefab into the bullet variable on the movement script. If you want to go ahead and click play, once it loads up, you will now notice we can move around, and upon pressing space we can spawn in the bullet, and we can spawn in as many of them as we want. Look, there's loads of them now. The issue is, however, they're not moving. Now bullets need to move, so we're going to add in movement for the bullets next. Come out to play, right click on the assets and create a new script called bullet movement. Once that's done, double click it to open it, and don't worry, we'll only add in a couple lines. With the script opened up, we're just going to have to add a couple lines, but straight away we're not going to need the void update, so we can remove that function completely. Then we're going to create two new variables. One is going to be public rigid body 2D RB. I'm calling it RB, but you can call it whatever you want. Basically, we just need a reference to the rigid body, as that's what's going to help it to move. The second variable we need is a simple public float speed, as this will tell us how fast the bullet's going to move. Then, if you want to head to the void start, we're going to put rb.velocity equals, because we want to change the velocity of it, and then transform.right times speed. Now this means that right at the very start, we're going to add to the velocity and say we want to be going right or forward, as it will appear, times however fast we want it to go. The only reason it's transform.right is because that's what works with the sprites I have. It will work with most, but for some special looking sprites, you might want to mess around and change it to dot forward or dot back and left. But anyway, once you've done that, just save it and we're all good to go. With the scripts now in, we're going to click on our enemy bullet prefab and then drag the bullet movement script we just made into the components section. You'll notice it pops up and it requires a rigid body and a speed. So what we're going to do is click on add component, go to physics 2D and add rigid body 2D. This allows it to move, so what we need to do before we forget is change the gravity modifier to 0 so the bullets don't just fall straight down. After that, set the speed to something like, I'm just going to put 5 for now, and then go ahead and click play. As you can see, we can now move around and press space as much as we want, and we are firing off a lot of bullets. We can shoot as much as we want. I want to change one little thing. Now technically the tutorial is over, but I want to change one little thing, because as you can see the bullets are coming from the middle of my sprite. I want them to come from my wand. So I'm going to quit the seat, I'm going to click on my player and right click and create empty. I'm then going to rename this new game object, which is a child of it, to something called spawn point, just because I want to call it that. And then I'm going to move that spawn point to the tip of the player's wand. Then I'm going to click on player and go to the movement script, and then instead of having player as the spawn point, I'm going to drag that new spawn point object to it, click on play, and then when I run around and press space now, you can clearly see that the bullet is now coming from the tip of my wand, and it looks a lot better. Just an extra little tip or trick I'm going to throw in for you. And that concludes the tutorial. I hope it helped you out, and if it did, please let me know in the comments, or even if you have any questions about certain parts of it, feel free to ask away and I'll do my best to get back to you within the hour. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I'm going to make a few more of these and think the next one's going to be how to actually make your bullets damage and hurt enemies. So if you look forward to that. If you are interested in more of these tutorials, please leave a like or subscribe for more. And as you can see, the footage in the background is not what we made today, but it's actually something I made over the past few months. So I've got my first game coming out officially on Steam in a couple of weeks. So if you're interested in that, I've put a link down to it below. And that's that. Got to do with self-representation, self-selling. It is what it is. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, just carry on enjoying it. Have a lovely, wonderful time as well. Hope to see you all next time. And that's that. See you all later. Bye.